What's up, everybody? This is Bam Bam, or Bammer, whatever you want to call me, coming at you with another little tech tip on 3D printing. So today we're going to address dryness or wetness of 3D filament, and I'm going to show you a really quick way to diagnose if your filament is too wet. I've seen a lot of incorrect diagnoses on the internet, whether it's in forums, on Reddit, on Facebook, on YouTube, whatever the case may be. With people saying, oh, your filament is wet, you need to throw down some glue stick on your build plate, and you need to put hairspray on your build plate, and you don't need to do any of that. In fact, when you're putting glue stick or hairspray down on your build plate to assist with build plate adherence or anything else that wet filament could be causing, maybe there's voids in your prints or crackling when you hear the filament being pushed through the nozzle, the hot nozzle, you hear a little popping noise every once in a while. That is a telltale sign of wet filament. Or even maybe if the edges of your print are coming up on the ends. So you can't see it here because my bed is pretty dry, but there's no corners are coming up, as you can see there. Corners aren't pulling up off the print bed, so it's adhering to the print bed properly. There's no voids. It's a pretty good print. There are some little strings here on the side you can see there, but that's, you know, right there on that wall. There's a little bit of stringing, but that's easy to fix. I'm talking about the big time stringing when you got massive strings atop the cross of your cavities, like if you were to have, you know, some stringing happening from one side of this hole to the other. Things like that, a sign of wet filament. Well, I can make it easier to diagnose without having to print out your whole print. In fact, that little print, that little strip right there on the front of the build plate, when your printer first starts printing, and I'm moving a little bit, but you can see it there. See that little strip of gray? If you look at that during your print process, you can easily tell if your filament is wet and if your print is going to be successful or not. So let me show you how. So first off, you need to examine that little strip. Sometimes I'll take my little blade and scrape it out off while it's printing, take a look at it real quick, make sure not to touch the build plate too much, or make sure that you're not, you know, knocking the y-axis out of gear or anything like that. But let me show you here an example. So this is pretty cool. So I've got all of these tabs that I've peeled out off, different colors, but I'm going to show you different conditions of filament. So I've printed with tons of different filaments, whether it's Bamboo Lab official filament, Elegoo, Duramic, eSun, Amelin, whatever the case may be, King Rune, it doesn't matter. Every single filament that I've ever printed with has come out fantastic. And I'm seeing a lot of end users having varying degrees of success with these filament types just because they don't have a dryer and they're using wet filament. So I'm going to show you a few things here real quick. So first off, your filament's going to be wet if you hear crackling. Like I said, no crackling is typically a telltale sign of filament that's dry enough. That's going to give you a quality print. But let's take a closer look here, why I've kind of taped these down. So I've organized these from wet to dry, and I'm going to show you how I can tell. So if you look closely, you can see the little diagram here. So this is representation with little bubbles or pits. Almost looks like yeah, like if you're doing a moon landing and you see all these craters in the moon. See that really close up? All those little bubbles there? Those bubbles are because of the fact that the filament is wet. Now, this doesn't mean that it's dripping wet. It just means that it sucks some moisture out of the air. It sucks some humidity out of the air. Maybe the bag that the filament was transported in might have gotten pierced at some point in time, or maybe it just wasn't completely dry at the factory. Maybe that silica gel pack that they threw in there wasn't, you know, a great silica gel pack. Maybe it was already saturated. But as you can see, crackling, and slowly we're getting more and more dry until you have something nice and smooth like this at the end. Not a single bubble in that final filament, and that's because I have a filament dryer. So I highly recommend using one of these filament dryers. I have an IBOS filament dryer. This comes in so much handy, especially if you live in an environment that has the majority of the year above, I'd say above 20% humidity. In my room, I have a little humidity monitor right here. Got a couple of them. The ambient humidity right now in the summertime in the West Coast near the ocean is about 40% humidity. So I need a dry box, because if I were to store my filament open like this all the time, I would sooner or later start to get some of these crackles, some of these little pits, and potentially some stringing on my prints, or little holes and voids in the walls. So since I'm in a high humidity environment, it's 39, almost 40% right now, I personally have to use a dry box. If you live in an environment that's below 20% humidity, you're usually fine. So that would be a place like, a desert region, maybe Nevada, southern Nevada, or southern California, more in the desert side, like maybe Lancaster or something like that, more in a desert environment. Inland Empire, starting to go that way towards maybe Bakersfield or Baker, or, once you get out in the desert a little bit, you're okay. Or maybe you live in northern Mexico or the Sahara Desert, any place where it is dry. You typically will not need an air dryer or an active dry box, but I highly recommend one of these if you are having these issues. It's going to save you a ton of time and effort sending, rolls back that you think are not good rolls of filament. So much time, a lot of times I'm hearing people where they're buying all these filaments, these not number one top name brand filaments, and they're sending returns back to Amazon or whatever all the time. If you purchase from Amazon and you purchase from a reputable manufacturer, or if you purchase directly from that manufacturer's website, like elegoo.com or amelun.com or bamboolab.com, if you're getting filament off of that, no problem. I don't see any issue with any of that. I've gotten all sorts of filaments from all different vendors. But like I said, dry boxes will 100% save you. It'll save you your time and effort from sending filament back. Also, just a quick couple features on my iBoast dry box down here. It's awesome. I've got a couple rolls of PETG, which I love in here. Some of the harder filament, some of the harder basic filament to print, just because it's so much more susceptible to sucking up moisture. And you have to dry it a little bit better. There's a lot of stringing that can happen because it's susceptible to sucking up that moisture, but I love it for its strength and also its higher heat resistance ability than typical PLA that can easily warp in 100 degree plus environments, or in the sun, or in UV exposed environments. But I've got a couple PETG rolls here drying. This thing is awesome. I can select my material, whether it's PETG or TPU or PLA are the three that I'm mainly using. And I just select the material here. It sets it up. It knows exactly how long to dry it for. I like to put my rolls through a couple cycles to make sure that it's super dry. For instance, like this gray here, this was what that PETG filament looked like coming out of the box, a little bit bubbly. And it took me about 2 or 3 2-hour cycles to get it this dry. So your mileage may vary on how many cycles you may need to put your filament in the dry box to get to a point where it's acceptable for you. I just like having optimally dry filament, because I can guarantee myself that it's going to print 100% properly every time without it being a filament issue. So one more thing that I want to mention as well: if your prints are failing to adhere to the print bed, don't use glue, don't use hairspray. Just take a little drop of Dawn dish detergent, take your print bed off, go wash it in the sink with that Dawn dish detergent, get it nice and sudsy, wash it off cleanly. Don't touch the surface where you print your prints on. Handle it by these little ledges on the side. There's a ledge on the front and the back on my Bamboo Lab plate. Those are the only places I touch, because the oil on your skin will create a barrier on the build plate. And so when that print nozzle goes down to put that printer on, there's going to be an oil layer there. And that's going to cause your print to fall off the bed or to peel up on the corners on the end. So that's another factor that will go into your print quality as well. So don't touch the bed. Some people use isopropyl alcohol. That doesn't fix the problem. That smears the oils across the print bed. It might help things out for a little bit, but eventually you will have to wash your print bed in Dawn dish detergent. Don't do hairspray. Don't do glue stick. If you do that, it's like putting a Band-Aid on an open bleeding wound. That Band-Aid is not going to do the job. It might look better, it might cover up the wound, but it's not going to fix the problem at its root cause, which is oily bed plate or wet filament. One more quick tip: if you live in high humidity environments, I highly recommend investing in some silica beads and an airtight dry box. I use one of these guys I get from my local dollar store for like $5. They fit about 4 rolls each, and I've got a little humidity indicator inside. You can get these for packs of like 4 or 8 from Amazon for, I don't know, like 10, maybe $15. They're a lifesaver. They help monitor how humid it is inside. I've got silica beads as well. Some I've purchased from Amazon. Always get the white ones. They're easier to recharge. Don't mess with the blue or the orange silica beads. But in any case, there is a way that you can recharge them. I'll let you refer to other sources for recharging silica beads. I want to make sure that this is video specifically about filament. But I keep this airtight with the silica gel in there, and this typically keeps the humidity down around below 20 degrees, or I'm sorry, 20% humidity. If it gets up to 25 in here, I'm usually okay with that, but usually at that point, I go in and I'll re-dry my silica beads in an oven or some sort of an air dryer to recharge my silica beads, throw them back in there, and then about a day, this will come back down to 15% or lower, which is awesome. It's perfect. These are great for long-term storage if you're storing things multiple months and you live in a humid environment. So highly recommend utilizing long-term dry box storages. Now, this dry box is not going to dry filament that's already wet. That's what you need a dryer for. So I think that pretty much concludes everything I wanted to say about wet filament, dry filament, and all of the problems that can come up when you have any sort of wet filament issues, indicators, just to help you troubleshoot some of those issues and make your printing life easier. So that being said, I'm signing off, and I will see you next time. Take care, guys.